everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for this Achates live session on Thursday, 12th of October. Today, we're going to be talking about crowdfunding and hearing from two panellists who both led very different but very successful crowdfunding campaigns for their respective organisations. We're going to be asking them about what worked, what was challenging, and their advice and recommendations for any organisations who may be considering or about to embark on a crowdfunding campaign of their own, or indeed those who are already in the thick of one. My name's Phoebe Walker, and I'm a senior consultant here at Achates. Achates is a cultural consultancy company providing support to cultural organisations with fundraising, recruitment, strategy, business planning, and impact evaluation. We take our name from Greek and Roman mythology. Achates was the close friend and loyal advisor to Aeneas, so we think our name quite neatly describes the relationship that we offer to our clients within the cultural sector. Achates Live was set up to really support the sector, bringing fundraisers and other arts professionals together to discuss key topics and also to enable you to help and support each other. Whilst we obviously acknowledge that Achates doesn't necessarily have all the answers, what we absolutely do have is an overview of the sector itself, and we're incredibly passionate about using this perspective and role in a supportive way. So today's session, as I mentioned, we focused on the topic of crowdfunding, and in just a moment, I'm going to introduce that topic in a bit more detail along with our two wonderful panellists today. And the final thing to say is that all of the information shared in today's conversation is, of course, correct at the time of broadcast. So when you hear the term crowdfunding, you might associate it with the commercial marketplace. That's why individuals use it as a mechanism to generate small amounts of capital from a large number of individuals in order to finance a new business venture, say from raising funds to support microbreweries, pop-up restaurants, or film projects. Crowdfunding makes use of the easy accessibility of vast networks of people through social media and crowdfunding websites to bring investors and entrepreneurs together with the potential to increase entrepreneurship by expanding the pool of investors beyond the traditional circles of owners, relatives, and venture capitalists. And in the UK alone, it's created the opportunity for entrepreneurs to raise hundreds of thousands of pounds and more from anyone who has the money to invest. You've probably also heard of platforms such as Kickstarter, JustGiving, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, which attract hundreds of thousands of people hoping to create or support the next big thing. More broadly, we're also all very used to seeing crowdfunding used to support philanthropic causes, from funding an individual's medical treatment to funneling support to on-the-ground aid organisations in times of conflict. Crowdfunding, although it only entered the Oxford English Dictionary as a term in 2015, now feels like an everyday part of our professional and social experiences. And for us as organisations particularly, a mechanism that can play an increasingly important role in the portfolio we put together when we think about income generation. The history of this kind of practice in the arts and cultural sector particularly is a long one. When Mozart initially struggled to raise the money for a tour he'd planned in the early 1780s, the story goes that he reached out to his fans and managed to raise enough to perform his 3 new piano concertos. 176 people supported the tour, and in return for their donations, they each received a concert manuscript with their names and Mozart's personal thanks. So this is what we know today as reward-based crowdfunding. In exchange for donations, investors receive goods, services, or discounts for their support. Opening up the invitation for anyone to contribute and in return to receive a stake in the thing they are enabling allows artists and cultural organisations to connect with a diverse range of individuals and to forge a community of supporters around a project or a piece of work, something that's greater than the sum of its parts. In the voluntary sector, we also, of course, have well-established leveraging campaigns such as the Big Give, the UK's biggest match fund campaign, which pledges to match funds raised by participating charities who undertake their own public fundraising campaigns. One question that I'd really like us to think about today is whether crowdfunding always needs to have an element of the transactional, or does the donor actually need to receive something that's less material in return? And there are also, of course, the many practical considerations around launching a crowdfunder, from choosing the right kind of platform, to deciding the parameters of the campaign, to crafting key messages, and in having the confidence in its effectiveness in a fairly saturated landscape. We know there are plenty of challenges and complex questions to consider for those running or launching a campaign. And so at this point, I'd really like to introduce our two brilliant panellists who will be talking about some of the ideas raised above, among other things, during our discussion today. So it's my pleasure to introduce, first of all, Sarah Odom, Events Assistant at Cockpick Studios. Hi, Sarah.
Hi Phoebe, nice to be here.
Lovely to have
Hello,
you. And
hello
I'd
everyone.
also like to introduce Abigail Woodman, who is the chair of East London Waterworks Park. Hi, Abby.
Hello, nice to be here today.
Lovely to have you, Abby. And just to introduce you a little bit further, so Sarah is, as I mentioned, events assistant at Cockpit Studios. Cockpit is a social enterprise and creative hub for the UK's most talented artists and makers. Sarah joined Cockpit on a Camden funded placement as an administrator, and her role has evolved with a focus on events. Passionate about supporting the creative industries, Sarah's role is integral to Cockpit's events, exhibitions and wider marketing campaigns. And over the last year, Sarah has contributed to the fundraising efforts of the recent and hugely successful Deptford crowdfunder, which we're going to be hearing more about. Sarah herself has an academic background in interior design and carpentry, and her experience and qualifications enable her to support the maker community and Cockpit in a unique way. Over the last year, crowdfunding has obviously played an important role for Cockpit, and through supporting planning and strategic outreach, Sarah has effectively engaged with many donors and stakeholders and supported in the delivery of the crowdfunding campaign, handling the coordination of rewards and maintaining ongoing relationships with donors. And Abigail Woodman, as I mentioned, chair of East London Waterworks Park. So Abby has worked in educational publishing for over 25 years. She currently runs her own business supporting clients, including Oxford University Press and Hodder Education, to develop publishing proposals in line with their strategic objectives, secure investment, and she also works with authors and project development teams to deliver on time and on budget. Abby's been involved with local community groups in Waltham Forest for many years, and she's one of the founder volunteer members of East London Waterworks Park, which Abby will be telling us more about in a second. She currently chairs the charity and is the chair of its governance circle. Abigail believes passionately in East London Waterworks Park because it's all about putting land ownership and control over land into the hands of the community so that we can make decisions that benefit the environment and bring us closer together and closer to nature. So those are, well, they feel like two stonking introductions, and it's really lovely to have you both with us. So thank you again. I wonder if to kick us off, if I could just ask you both in turn to talk a little bit more about your organisation and obviously particularly about your experiences in developing and delivering the crowdfunders within your organisations, what's been really successful, what's been challenging, what you've learned. And Sarah, I wonder if we could come to you first for that.
Sure, thank you, Phoebe. Thank you for the introductions. So I am Sarah O'Dong, the events assistant at Cockpit. And so Cockpit is an arts charity and top 100 social enterprise. We provide studio space essentially and business support for over 160 makers who are hugely talented and very sought after within their own industries. So we have two London sites. We have Bloomsbury and Deptford, and this year was a very exciting year for Cockpit as we kind of come to a completion of our 2-year redevelopment at our Deptford site. So this was an opportunity for us to really provide more studio space, which is very much needed across London. It's very competitive, and we run at high capacity across both sites. One of our main focuses, though, however, was to really grow our community outreach and kind of profile for Cockpit. So we really wanted to open our doors, bring kind of more of the local community in. And we did this by, through our redevelopment, just physically bringing the entire front wall down so we could physically make the entrance a lot more welcoming. And we really wanted to create a very special craft garden within Cockpit. And so with the craft garden in mind, we looked into running a 30-day crowdfunder, which would really open up the space and kind of bring the public in a way that we haven't done before. So this 30-day crowdfunding campaign was to necessitate the costs of the landscaping for the garden. So that we had to raise £15,000. So we worked with a platform called Art Fund to help deliver us this campaign. And as you mentioned, it was hugely successful. And I think it was 50% of the funds were raised in 24 hours. In 48 hours, we'd hit 84% of our target. And we smashed the target in 6 days. which was amazing and completely unprecedented. This really enabled us to introduce like a stretch target. So we closed the campaign on 17.4 thousand. And we then, after that, received further donations because there was so much interest in the campaign. And that really took us over to over 20K, which was our initial kind of stretch target. It was hugely successful. It was a lot of work and a lot of effort. It did need a collaborative approach from the whole team. Where as a charity, we're a very small team, so we often need to lean on each other in that way to get the results that we need. We had already secured a significant kind of portion of the wider project and its funding through kind of various different streams like the Good Growth Fund and Stride partnerships. But it was really interesting for us to run a campaign, a crowdfunder campaign, as an opportunity for us to really broaden our audience beyond kind of our usual community. And it allowed us to implement a marketing strategy that was around the campaign and gaining support kind of from the general public. We'd definitely consider doing something similar again in the future where appropriate. It is worth the effort and definitely pays off. So I would definitely recommend it. One of the reasons why we focused on the garden itself as the crowdfunder was because it was one of the most visible front-facing elements of the redevelopment. And we were working with a well-known garden landscaper called Sebastian Cox, and that really helped kind of gain that attraction and interest from the public. And I think where we were trying to promote the redevelopment anyway, it was a really great opportunity to use that moment to do a crowdfunding campaign alongside it. So that's, I guess, a very brief nutshell.
That's great. Thanks so much, Sarah. That's really, really interesting. And I think that touches on lots of the things that I'm sure people will be considering thinking about, especially sort of thinking about the very tight parameters of your campaign. The fact that it went over target and how amazing that is, but also what that enables you to kind of leverage, and the idea that it's about kind of obviously not just generating the income that you wanted, but about kind of building the community around Cockpit, particularly given what you are actually crowdfunding for. And I think it sounds like there's quite a few parallels with the crowdfunders that I know East London Waterworks Park has run. So Abby, if we can come to you for kind of for your summary of your own crowdfunding campaigns, and also a bit more about East London Waterworks Park as well, would be brilliant to hear. So please.
So we're a community group, 100% volunteer organisation, and we want to buy a 5.68 hectare plot of land in East London. It's currently a slab of concrete and it's currently owned by central government. And we want to buy it and transform it into a biodiverse park with wild swimming ponds, a range of different habitats and community spaces that are all accessible for free. So it's about owning land and managing land by the community for the community. The reason we set out to do the crowdfunder is because we needed credibility. As a volunteer organisation, as a community organisation, our conversation with the landowner wasn't really going to go anywhere unless we had some money behind us. So we needed to raise money in a very impactful and a way that announced ourselves as an organisation that should be taken seriously. We went with the crowdfunder platform. And we were crowdfunding for an idea. So that's at the end of this, we have a pot of money in the bank, but we don't necessarily have the land. So that was a significant challenge for us, crowdfunding for an idea. It needed to be a significant amount of money. So we set it at 500,000. We felt it was really important that we made that target. So we made it an all or nothing crowdfunder as well. And that's a really critical decision about whether you're going to accept the money if you only get part way there, or whether you're going to make it all or nothing and your donors get their money back if you don't reach your target. we had a huge battle to become a charity before we went live with the crowdfunder. We made it by about 10 days, I think it was, so that we could claim the gift aid, because that gift aid is a huge, important part of that amount of money that you can bring in. We were building on a crowdfunder that we had done a year earlier, but that was only £30,000. So we had a reputation for raising money and delivering what we raised, but we had a very small mailing list and we had some social media presence, but not very much. So we were really starting from a standing start in many ways to raise a significant amount of money. And we actually did it. We raised over £500,000 in 8 months, just as the cost of living crisis started to bite. So it was June last year around to February this year. We had over 5,000 donors donating between £1,000 and £50,000. And I think we mainly pushed that through social media. We had a few offline events, a couple of raffles and quizzes, and a music event and a quiz. But mainly it was by pushing through social media and a few sort of local talks. We did extend a number of times, and I think that's quite an important tool that you have in your armory when you've got an all or nothing crowdfunder. You can extend that. And I think we extended twice, maybe 3 times. And the last time we made a decision that that would be our last time. And if we didn't make it, we wouldn't make it. And we did, which was fantastic. And I think, you know, it was an incredibly humbling experience. It demonstrates real support for green and blue spaces, for community, and for doing it differently. And people who weren't talking to us before the crowdfunder are talking to us now, because I think to raise that much money for an idea is quite a kind of significant and, as I say, quite humbling thing.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. It is amazing, the idea that, you know, you were asking people to, as you say, invest in something that was ephemeral, wasn't really going to result in kind of at this point anyway, a tangible kind of space or a thing that they could kind of experience very soon after having donated. And just again, kind of the rampant success of that campaign is amazing. I know, as you say, you're all East London Waterworks Park, you're all volunteer led. You don't have kind of lots and lots of fundraising experience. You don't have kind of that bedrock of donors around you. It's a new idea, it's a new proposal. So you are kind of building your community at the same time as trying to build your base of income and your base of support.
Can I just say, Phoebe, one thing I do want to mention is we took a very long time working out what happened if the project fails in the future. So obviously we're in the process of trying to buy the land at the moment, but we looked very carefully at the Charity Commission advice on failed fundraising campaigns. And so we have a plan B that was very much part of our original campaign, so that we know what we're doing with that money. And that was a really important thinking process for us to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're happy to talk about what was the contingency that you decided on as a result of what you would have done if it had.
Yeah, so we've obviously raised this money to buy the land. That's now locked away in a bank account, and we're working on that negotiation. If it fails, we will turn ourselves into a grant funding organisation locally around the objects of our charity, which are an environmental charity around biodiversity, prudent use of natural resources, and land ownership. So there's a plan A and a plan B, but we are firmly fixed on plan A at the moment. But we didn't want to get into a situation where we failed with our fundraising ask and we had to try and return the money, which via a crowdfunder I think would be nigh on impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, thank you, Abby. Two, I think, really, really different campaigns, but yeah, as I say, interesting parallels between both of them. And just to kind of, to pull out some of your experiences a bit more with some questions. Sarah, I wondered if I could talk to you about kind of the mechanics of the campaign. What was the kind of the key messaging, and were you offering, we talked a bit at the top of this conversation about sort of that's the more transactional and the philanthropic approach to crowdfunding. You know, what is it that you're kind of offering your donors, your supporters in return for their support? So with your campaign, how did you think about that, and were there things that you kind of offered, what was the messaging around kind of the impact case or the benefits case, or both?
Thank you, Phoebe. I think, yeah, our campaign is probably on a slightly different scale to Abby's, but nonetheless, I think our main focus was really to just raise that profile and that awareness, and to try to secure longer term relationships with our donors. So whether they're donating money or their interest, then it was enough for us. And we know that it will snowball in the future, and they'll come back through our doors, whether it's kind of on a program, a workshop, or maybe just to visit us through Open Studios. So for us, it was a fundraising campaign, but also a marketing campaign. And if we could get either or, amazing. If we can get both, then that's the best outcome. So in terms of kind of our messaging, it was really just homing in on kind of what we are, who we are, and what we're trying to do. So we're there to support kind of new talent and helping our makers kind of create a successful career within the industry, which can be super challenging at times. So we're giving them our studio spaces, and talking about our redevelopment, kind of really putting ourselves in a centric position in Deptford. So kind of raising our name and really creating some noise around the campaign for our kind of neighbouring communities. So looking at the actual rewards itself, we made sure that we had kind of something for everybody. So our rewards scaled from £5 over to £3,500, and they were not just physical rewards, they were also experiences as well. So we were able to offer tours to our new site and kind of very bespoke one-off experiences that maybe you can't find on the internet elsewhere. So that really helped us stand out and be very distinctive in our campaign. And I think that was really successful for us. We're really lucky to have such a varied pool of talented makers who were more than happy to kind of donate their pieces and their time for us. And I think I would definitely recommend, if you can think of a reward to offer that is as unique as possible, and that will really help you stand out, to make your campaigns as successful as possible.
So, Sarah, I wondered if I could just come to you with another question, because I think you mentioned this in your introduction, and also it'd be really useful to hear from Abby on this too, but just the point you made about the resources, the staff time, the capacity needed to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. I think particularly because yours was kind of telescoped into such a short period of time. And I think we all know no one's under any illusion that it's a lot of work launching and delivering and doing and running the aftermath of a crowdfunding campaign. But if you could just share a bit about your experience in terms of how it worked out in terms of capacity needed, and whether there were any, I guess, surprises in terms of that as well when you were running Cockpit's crowdfunder.
Thank you, Phoebe. It's a really great kind of thinking point, and as you'd mentioned, it's something that people may not be aware of, that there is a lot of effort and work involved to deliver this type of campaign. So it's just 30 days, but there is probably about 4 to 6 months preparation that goes into kind of the planning quite early on. I think it's really important to, from the offset, create really clear objectives and kind of project timelines across kind of all the departments that are working on the campaign. We are a small team, so it did need a collaborative approach from kind of most of the departments here at Cockpit, which was really key to the success of the campaign. So one of the biggest drivers for this was kind of pushing our kind of awareness of Cockpit, and so that was coming from kind of the marketing team, so it wasn't just a fundraising effort, and the combination of both really helped propel the campaign as a whole. It we usually work in this kind of collaborative way, as I've mentioned. So I think it's really important to establish early on kind of each team member's responsibilities and what is expected of them, and try to anticipate kind of potential challenges along the way as much as you can. So it was important for us to have a really good idea around each reward, what that means, what type of delivery timeline we can then keep the donors up to date in due course to manage their expectations and kind of keep everyone in the loop. I would say for us, and something that we learned along the way, and something that is key to consider for anyone else who is running a campaign, is to really think about your own timing in terms of your organisation and what's happening in your calendar. So we have lots going on, and at different times of the year it can be super busy. And we did this campaign, and then we had our open studios, which is a massive event at Cockpit, as we open our doors kind of just twice a year to the public. So it's really important to be mindful of what's happening and to avoid any potential clashes that could put pressure on the team. We were really lucky that we had such a supportive kind of joint effort from everybody. And another thing that can really work and be really an easy kind of approach is to maybe kick off the campaign with an event that you're already doing. So this is something that we did. We run an annual social impact report event called the Cockpit Effect, and we use this event where we have VIP supporters and funders and really key contacts. We use this event to kick off our campaign and really go around and get pledges from our supporters and really rally that kind of support. So I would definitely recommend, if you have something going on already, to just piggyback on top of that, and then you can really capture those audiences that are already there. It's an easy one to do and worth considering.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. I think that, yeah, that's such an important point about kind of the organisational calendar, like looking at where this campaign sits within that much longer term frame of what's going on within the organisation. Like you say, what are the potential clashes that we can avoid, but also what are the events and the happenings and the other things going on in the life of our organisation that could really jumpstart or galvanise the campaign at different points. And Abby, obviously your campaign had a much longer time frame. So I'm wondering as well, the same question around kind of resource and how you managed it, particularly again, as you're all volunteers, and how you kind of manage that, the administration of it as well as everything else, but also thinking about that timeline and about what Sarah's talked about and kind of the calendar of what else is going on, how you sort of, whether you did similar, whether you tied certain points of your campaign to other things that were going on, how you kind of maintained the campaign's momentum over that longer period that it was running.
So I think we focused everything on the crowdfunder. The whole organisation's focus was on the crowdfunder, and a wonderful guy called Nathan Miller stepped up to run the crowdfunder, and I think that was the success for us. Putting one person where and everybody knew that if he put a call out for support, we needed to swing round and support him. And I think there was a question, Phoebe, in your briefing questions about how do you sort of help departments work together. And I think that was really key for us, to have somebody who is driving that momentum all the time. And Nathan is absolutely fantastic about that. He's got huge energy and was just powering onwards to kind of keep pushing it. And it was tough to keep it going for 8 months, because you have to keep that momentum going. And, the idea of doing it over 30 days sounds absolutely marvelous. But we needed to keep it going for a much longer time to raise that huge sum of money. I think we also put in a huge amount of time preparing the page the crowdfunder page. And I was talking to Nathan before we met today, and he was saying to me he thinks there are 3 key things that you need to get lined up before you launch your crowdfunder. So product aligned with audiences, aligned with marketing. So we thought very carefully about our 3 things. What 3 things were we selling, as it were? And they were, for us, wild swimming, biodiversity, and human inclusivity. So those were what was driving us, what we want to sell, as it were. And from that, we developed our page. And he was talking a lot about our 5-word sell. So what is your page called? What is your call to action, as it were? And does it hit those 3 things that you've identified as part of your product? So ours was, let me read it, community-owned natural swimming ponds. So we've got your swimming, you've got your biodiversity, and you've got your inclusivity in there. And the idea being that your audiences will find something in that statement which will help them click through, and that then your case page is actually quite long and quite detailed, because you want people to be able to read through it and find something that resonates with them. So I think one way might be to be very short and concise to kind of grab people and move them on, but we were very much saying we need to draw in as many people as possible and give them as much information as possible, so the thing that chimes with them is there. So we did take a very long time to get that page right. We had it reviewed by quite a lot of different people to see whether it was making sense and chiming with them, and lots of revisions. And then our marketing then focused on those 3 audiences. So swimming people, nature people, and people interested in community and inclusivity. We then built some really, really big lists around those 3 groups of people. Lots of posting on Facebook groups. So Nathan was posting every 2 weeks on over 70 Facebook groups, giving them updates on the campaign, updates on the project. We were keeping our social media kind of constantly and regularly updated. And so it was really kind of communicating where we were, what we were doing, what was happening, and just keeping that momentum going, which, as I say, for 8 months was really challenging, but the whole organisation was focused on doing that.
That's really fascinating. Thanks, Abby. I think just the idea that you had obviously this mammoth project, this visionary idea, but that you thought so strategically about kind of boiling it down into the key messages, the key audiences, like you said, and thinking of it in as simple a way as you could for that, the initial hook, the initial engagement, and then working out what is it you want people to kind of be seeing in that campaign that chimes with what they're interested in. And also really interesting your point about kind of having one person, or I suppose it might be one team or one department, who are really driving that crowdfund. Obviously it's a whole organisation thing. You want everyone to be who's working in the organisation to be buying into it, but having a person or people who are kind of championing it internally as well and driving it forward sounds just so important, and obviously paid off massively for you, having Nathan on board to do that work for East London Waterworks Park. So I mean, we've talked about kind of obviously the importance of building that base of supporters and getting in those contributions to the campaign. I wanted to just touch on non-financial support as part of crowdfunding campaigns as well, and bringing on kind of advocates and ambassadors who can help you widen the appeal, but I suppose also potentially become kind of longer term advocates for the organisation as well. So Sarah, in your experience, did your campaign, were you also galvanising kind of advocates to help you spread the word? Did you find that people who were interested in kind of playing that more advocate-based role came to you via the campaign? Was that kind of part of what you experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had various different directions that we kind of took this on. So I'd say one of our biggest kind of ambassadors and advocates are our makers, which we're so fortunate to have so many of them. So over 160. And so already immediately on our doorstep, we have such a huge group of people who can help spread the word. And they did, and they were happy to do so. They're such a supportive community who are willing us on. And so that was our first point of call. So we went to our makers and we asked them to help spread the word far and wide across their socials. And it's a really easy ask. So not only were they kind of donating their pieces to us in exchange for some of our rewards, they were also giving us their time and their effort. So lots of our makers go to their own exhibitions and events and have their own circles of network. So that was a very, I think, quick way to very quickly grow new audiences and to really kind of build momentum. We already have other pools of kind of existing supporters, I guess, through our funders and our trusts. So that was also one of our approaches. And so they went within their own communities and helped spread the word. And this really helped kind of galvanize new audiences. We have other groups of I guess, supporters, including kind of Lewisham Council and GLA, and they really helped push that, particularly on a kind of geographical based locations within the Deptford community. So that was really helpful for us, and they helped kind of create that noise about the project. And we worked with local partners within the Deptford area, so the Albany, Trinity Laban and Deptford Library. So they helped push our flyering and posters, and I think it was really key to create digital assets as early on as we could, so that they could help push that in the lead up to the campaign. And we had a really robust kind of flyering campaign, which we kind of posted through all of the local neighbouring communities. So that was really helpful and impactful for us. I think it really contributed to the success of the campaign.
Right, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, and I think that point about having your assets there and ready to go is a really important one as well, to help with that kind of the building of the wider network and enabling people to advocate for you, making it as easy as possible for them to do it. And Abby, I know in our work together, we've talked quite a lot about kind of advocates and ambassadors for East London Waterworks Park. And obviously you are, you're raising your profile, as we've said, at the same time as crowdfunding and getting people involved in what this work is. But I think you gained quite a few sort of people who were ready to step into that kind of ambassadorial role through the crowdfunder. I think was that the case?
Yeah, I think our campaign was very organic. It spread very naturally, and that's, it took a longer period of time to do that. We never had that viral moment. We had an article in The Guardian, which I think we had lots and lots of local press, which was fantastic. And then we had that one article in The Guardian, and you could see a real spike in interest nationally when that happened. But it was very much a local campaign based in the local community. We largely relied on social media, as I said, but we did do some flyering. And I think one of the things we want to work on now is how we build those relationships with people who aren't on social media, who aren't connected digitally. And that's obviously a challenge for an organisation that doesn't necessarily have the capacity to print and pay for flyers. We did do some, but it was relatively minimal. We did rely on Facebook ads, targeted them very locally. So that was where we ended up spending the small fundraising budget that we'd identified. We felt that was where we were getting most traction. So I think we did have some people who came forward and made significant donations, and we made some important connections, but that was very much, as you say, Phoebe, through the process of the crowdfunder, as opposed to those people being there to help us launch and get the crowdfunder going. And I think the other thing I just wanted to say was about the rewards. We talked about this for a very long time. Obviously, as an environmental group, we were nervous about creating stuff and encouraging consumption. But at the same time, we wanted to reward people. And then we had this challenge that while some of those rewards might be linked to the site, so for example, tree dedications or naming benches or chairs or things within the site, we wouldn't necessarily have the site at the end of the crowdfunder, so we wouldn't be able to put those into action very quickly. So one of the things we've decided to do subsequently is create a web page where we kind of create those dedications virtually, so that they're there, they are, you know, people's donations are being recognised, and also those dedications that they wanted to make are out in the world before we have the site, and then we can transition them onto the site. And we had some amazing artwork has been created around the project, and we created a print as one of our kind of lower stage rewards, a print and a postcard that we sent out to people. But what was really fascinating was that most of the rewards didn't ask, so most of the donations didn't ask for a reward, which I think one's quite counter to the usual crowdfunding concept, where it is very, very quite transactional. You know, I'm giving you some money, and in return I am getting something. So I think there is a possibility there for a charity to say, you know, our reward is perhaps a little bit more intangible, and I don't think that's necessarily a barrier to having a successful crowdfunder. You know, we talked about whether we could get, I love the idea of kind of makers running events and things like that. I think that those are brilliant rewards. We just didn't have those people to draw on, and so we were trying to kind of create you know, something that would make people feel invested in the park in the long term. So our dedications page on our website is kind of where we are really with that.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Ivy. The idea that, yeah, that the rewards scheme that you offer, or the way that you look at that being so important to take in your organisational ethos, it's a really, really good point. And I think your point about kind of, you know, we maybe do think traditionally of crowdfunding mechanisms as being transactional, but as you say, I think there is the move that's more into the impact space. We had an Achates live session on memberships a couple of months ago, where we talked about this kind of benefits-led memberships and impact philanthropy-led memberships, and how we're seeing the kind of the shift to the latter. So I think that definitely plays into crowdfunding campaigning as well. I'm aware we're coming up against time, which is such a shame, because I could go on chatting to you both about these campaigns all day. I just quickly wanted to ask you both, as a final question, about the sort of the shorter term legacy, I guess, of the supporters you gained through the campaign, and how you have cultivated those relationships, and whether it's resulted in kind of further support, and basically how you manage that, the aftercare process of the supporters you gain through a crowdfunding campaign. Sarah, do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, sure. So I think kind of our maintaining relationships with donors probably starts from kind of follow-up comms, so kind of keeping them in touch around the status of their reward. Some rewards we were able to kind of facilitate sending out straight away. Others were more kind of bespoke pieces, where they take some time to curate. So kind of keeping them up to date, and that's kind of building those kind of relationships with them, kind of trying to create quite tailored responses dependent on kind of different rewards, kind of really brings a personal touch. And I'd say kind of another thing that was really important that we did was extend, I guess, our thank you for participating in the campaign by kind of inviting them back we have a VIP launch for the redevelopment in December. So that was really key for us as kind of a first touch point to re-engage with our supporters. And given that this redevelopment and the campaign rather was focused on the garden, and being that the launch is in December, it's not the most I guess opportune time to bring them in, because it's not necessarily going to be in full bloom. But actually we look at that as an opportunity to then know that we're going to re-invite them back in, and we're going to create a moment in spring when we can see everything in full bloom and at its best. So we now have 2 points where we can bring them in, and providing they opt in, we will keep them on our system to provide kind of regular updates in the future, and kind of invite them back for other events across kind of both cockpit sites, and keep them on our mailing list, and they can be on our VIP list and be our kind of go above and beyond the relationships that we had initially built, which is great. And that's, I guess, how we would kind of secure those longer term relationships.
Right, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and I suppose as well, thinking about those supporters who may be you know, geographically a bit more dispersed, or they're maybe not able or placed to attend kind of the physical event stuff, but that you've still got relationship management that focuses on kind of that, a bespoke way to manage that relationship, and making sure that people are still very involved in kind of the afterlife of the campaign. And Abby, what was your approach to kind of all the new supporters that you gained, and all these people who are suddenly kind of part of your community? How are you approaching kind of relationship management and kind of onward support, perhaps, from that group?
I mean, very similar in many ways, making sure that we're keeping people up to date with what's going on, both emailing through Crowdfunder, which you can continue doing after the crowdfunder is finished if you keep it on, and also with our more detailed newsletter, asking people to sign up for that more detailed newsletter. I think for us, it's very much about keeping people clearly appraised with progress, and we do get people getting in touch with us and asking questions and asking updates, and it's very important to us that we're listening to what people are asking and responding fully to those questions, and then communicating that more externally. So one of our high value donors came back and said, I'm a bit confused about this, I need a bit more information on this. So we listened to that and said, right, here's that information for you, but let's send it out to everyone else as well. So we are probably trying to create a very reciprocal relationship, that we're in this partnership together. And if you have questions for us, we'll answer them. We'll also try and communicate openly with you at every step along the way. So I think it's about transparency, really, and building a relationship, and acknowledging that it is a relationship. So there is that two-way nature to it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Abby. The idea that, as you say, we don't want to think in just these in transactional terms when we're thinking about crowdfunders. It is about kind of the wider investment in your organisation and the relationship that you build. I think, sadly, we're probably at the point where we wind up this conversation today. So once again, I just have to say a huge thank you to our brilliant panelists, Sarah and Abby, for really fascinating, insightful discussions. Thank you so much for being really open and generous and sharing your experiences with crowdfunding, kind of the challenges as well as all the many successes that you've had. And thank you as well to my colleague Ariana, who's been managing everything behind the scenes. So just to let everyone know again, as you know, here at Achates, we offer a range of services, including recruitment, fundraising, strategy, organisational development. And if you'd like to discuss how we might be able to support you and your organisation, or if you'd just like to speak to a member of our team for a chat about what we do and where you're at with your organisation, please do just drop us a line. That's info@achates.org.uk. And finally, just to note, our next Achates Live will be held on Thursday, the 9th of November. There'll be more details to follow on that one soon, so please keep an eye on your inbox. And so just remains for me to say thank you so much to everyone who's been joining us today. We look forward to seeing you back with us again next month. Bye for now.